everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make some St. Patrick's Day pins using TinkerCAD. So as you can see here, these are two different designs that we're going to be working on today. The one on the left is a shamrock that we're going to build from scratch using the built-in TinkerCAD objects. The other, the Celtic knot design, is a little more advanced tutorial that I'm going to show you, and that's going to involve importing your own artwork, 2D artwork, into TinkerCAD and then converting it into a 3D object. So I'm going to show you how to do both of these today, so let's get started. So first off, we're going to want to go to TinkerCAD and click Create a New Design. And we're going to start with the shamrock. So TinkerCAD has a nice shape already made for us, a heart that will serve as one of our clover leaves. Let me zoom in a little bit here. And I'm going to make it a little bit shorter. We'll say 5 millimeters. All right, and if you click on these dots on the edge, you can resize it. I'm going to make it a little narrower. That looks good. And I'll change the color, green. The color doesn't matter. Whatever it prints as will be the color of the plastic filament in the 3D printer. I'm just changing the color just to be a little more festive. All right, so we have our one leaf here. So now I'm going to do Control-C to copy it and Control-V to paste it. You can also do the same by clicking an object and using the tools on the top left. You can see here, copy, paste, and that'll do the same thing. All right, so we have our three leaves now. Now we're going to arrange them in the shape of a clover. So if you hold down the Shift key, it'll move it in increments of 45 degrees. So that's what we're going to do. And we're just going to eyeball it at first. So holding down the Shift key that time, you can see I can move it by 1 degree increments. All right. Okay, so first let's make sure that the left and right are aligned. So I'm going to click one, hold down the Shift key, and click the second. Oops. There we go. And the Align tool is up on the top right. You can see here, Align. You can also get it by hitting the L key. And then you can see I now have these black dots that are asking me on which axis I want to align the tools. So I'm going to click this dot right here to align them on that axis. Perfect. And now I know if I move the object with the arrow keys, it will move it perfectly up, down, left, or right. So now I can get it exactly where I want it. That looks pretty good right there. Maybe a little bit back. Okay. So the distance it moves each time you hit the arrow key is determined by the snap grid on the bottom. So if I click that, you can see every time I use the arrows, it moves at 1 millimeter. I'm going to move that. I'm going to change it to 0.25 just to have a little more control. Okay, so I like where these two are. So I'm going to select them both, and I'm going to group them together, which you can do by Control-Z or by hitting Group here at the top. All right, so now I have my left and right leaves as one object. Now I want to add this one. So first I want to make sure that it's perfectly lined up in the center. So I'm going to select this object, hold Shift and click the second one. You can also select multiple objects by just drawing a box around both of them, but you have more control if you click one, hold Shift, and click the next. All right, now I'm going to align these two on the vertical axis here so they're perfectly lined up. And now I know they're aligned, so I can use the arrow key to kind of move it down. I'm eyeballing it, but I think that looks pretty good. All right, now I'm going to select everything, group it together. All right. So now that I have all of my leaves put together, I can adjust this whole shape and kind of get it to how I like it. But I like the way it looks now. Okay, so now we're going to work on the stem. Now, I found the best way to do this is with the tube. object. It's that orange circle here. I'm going to pull that out. And I want to make sure it's the same height as the clover, so I'm going to click it, get rid of that. So if you remember, I set this to 5 millimeters, which you can always tell by highlighting over the center white dot there. Set to 5 millimeters. So I want to do the same for this. So I'm going to click that middle dot, and I can actually just type in 5 here, hit enter, and now it's 5 millimeters high. All right, and now I'm going to grab a hole, and I'm going to cut this tube shape into a stem. So that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to select both the hole and the object and group those, and it should cut the hole out of the object, which it did. And now I can arrange this to be the stem of my pin. And you can always rotate it as well if you want to fine tune it. You can stretch it out. I think that looks pretty good to me. All right, so once you get it how you like it, again, just select them both, group, and there we go, we have our shamrock. So the last thing we need to do is to make a little loop on the back of the pin that we can thread a clothespin or some kind of object that allows us to pin it to our clothes. So I'm going to do this again with the tube object. And you can rotate it. Oops, I don't know what just happened. All right, yeah, select it, rotate it 90 degrees. There we go. And I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, a lot smaller. Don't need it quite so wide. So again, this is what our clothespin is going to be thread through, so we can pin this to our clothes. So it doesn't need to be big at all. But you don't want to make it so small that the 3D printer doesn't have enough detail to make this little hole. So I think this is a pretty good size. Okay, so now I just want the top half, so I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to do that with, again, another hole. So I can do this one of two ways. I can either bring this up and cut it out that way, or I can bring the box down and just cut it off at the bottom. So I know that this box is 20 millimeters high. That's just the standard height when you bring something in from the side here. So I'm going to lower it to minus 20 millimeters. So you can see minus 20 here means it's totally flush with the work plane. So now, lower this a little bit more. Oops. Zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. All right, that looks perfect. All right, so now I'm going to group these two. And now you can see I just hacked off the bottom there. Now I want this to rest right on top of the shamrock, so I need to raise it 5 millimeters because that's the height of the shamrock. So you can raise and lower something by clicking this little black cone on the top. And 5 millimeters, perfect. Now, if you want this to be in the direct center of this whole object, you can select them both and click the Align tool and align by the Y and X axis, and it should plop it right in the middle. Now, if you can spot the problem with this, when I thread the pin through and we pin this to our clothes, the shamrock's going to be oriented sideways. So let's rotate the hole 90 degrees. Perfect. So now the clothespin is going to thread through here, left to right. Perfect. So now we're going to group everything. And we're done. We can send it to the printer. So pretty simple to do the Shamrock. Now I'm going to show you a little more advanced technique, and we're going to make some cool Celtic knot pins. So to do that, you're going to use TinkerCAD's ability to convert 2D SVG files into 3D objects. So an SVG file is a 2D image, but it's not drawn with pixels the way a JPEG or a PNG file is. It's drawn with vectors, which means it's drawn with curves. So a 3D printing program can easily take those curves and make them into a 3D object. Whereas if they were all in pixels, a 3D printer wouldn't know what to do with that. So you can import files by clicking import on the top right. And you can see here TinkerCAD supports STL, OBJ, and SVG. So STL and OBJ are 3D files. SVG is the file that we're interested in. That's the 2D artwork. So you might be asking, where do you get SVG files? So I found a great website that converts pictures, regular pictures or drawings you may have, into SVG files. And it is called, let me open up a new tab here. You're going to go to picsvg.com. picsvg.com. And the website itself doesn't look so great, but it works fantastic. So you can see there is an upload a picture button right here. So I'm going to click upload a picture. And if I go to my desktop, I have a few pictures I've downloaded from the internet already. So let me open up this one just to show you what I found. Okay, so this image on the left is the one I downloaded from the internet. It's just a simple triangle Celtic knot. The only important thing you really need to know when converting pictures to SVG is they have to be black and white, totally black and white. It can't be any grays or anything, no color. Well, you can have color, it just has to have contrast. So, for instance, on this image here, everything is either black or white. That is really important. So you can see by default, this is how it'll come out when I download it as an SVG. And it looks like it's created a sort of outline around the objects that it found. We don't want that. So you can see right above it, where it says details and filters, for some reason it defaults to invert to. I'm going to change that to one of these ready options at the bottom, and you can play around with these. It's probably going to be different for every file. But now I changed it to ready 1, and you can see it now created something that's very similar to the picture I uploaded. So now I'm going to click download SVG, and you can see a little download happened at the bottom. You're going to get a weird string of characters .svg. That's the file. That's what we want. So let me show you another option. I'm going to upload another picture here. So you can see here, this one is green and white, but it still is going to work, as you can see, because the contrast is all the way up. It's either white or a solid color. There's no grays. If I had like a gradation in any of this green area, it would get confused, and this image on the right here would be all sliced up, and there'd be dots everywhere, and it would just look a mess. So whatever image you find, make sure it looks like this. It's either black and white or all one color and white. All right, so let's go back to TinkerCAD, and we'll import all of these SVG files that we downloaded. So we're going to click import on the top right, choose file. I'm going to select the first knot that I downloaded. You get a little preview here. It'll tell you the scale. So you can adjust the scale if you want it larger or smaller, dimensions, but we can all adjust this all after the fact too. So I'm going to click import. And you can see it's importing on the bottom left here. And it's been imported. If it looks huge like this, that's okay. It's only because SVG files have a very high resolution, so that's okay. We can just downscale it. So I'm going to click on the corner, make it nice and small. It looks like it got distorted. Let me backtrack a little bit. I wasn't holding shift. That's why I lost its dimensions. Okay, so we got that in. So you can see, it looks pretty good. Now, you might be thinking, are these gaps going to cause a problem when you 3D print? Yes. Yes, they are. So we're going to address that in a moment. But let me import a couple others just to show you what it'll look like. So it looks like all of the SVG files will look pretty large, but that's okay. You can always scale them down, like I said. Whoops. And I have one more I wanted to show you. So let me go back to the Pick SVG website. So you don't need to have a perfectly clean image like this. If you have a design yourself that you want to import into TinkerCAD, you can do that. So I found a hand-drawn Celtic knot that I will import here. So this, you can see this one's a little rough on the left. That's because someone hand drew this one on the left. Now, you can see it's because it's a little bit rougher, there's some like little specks in here and things, but if you mess around with the filters, you should get it to look pretty good. So now that's looks almost exactly like the original. But I just wanted to show you this because you can illustrate your own, do your own designs and import them into TinkerCAD. You just have to make sure that they're completely black and white. So you can see this, even though this is hand drawn, it's either white or black, and that's why it's working really well here. All right, so now I can import that one as well. Click import. All right, great. See how it came in perfectly, and this is all hand-drawn artwork. All right. So getting back to the pin. So just, we're going to have to fill in these gaps, or a few of them, in order to make this pin one solid object. Because when we send this to the 3D printer, because of these gaps here, it's going to print as three separate objects. It's going to be, this part's going to be an object, this part's going to be an object, and this is going to be an object. So that's not going to work for a pin. It all needs to be one solid object. So what we're going to do is create little bridges that will fill in these gaps, and they don't need to be the full width of this design. They just need to be enough for the 3D printer to connect these objects. So we can do that pretty easily with a box tool. So we just need to find out what the height is of this. I'm going to set this height to 5 millimeters, so it's consistent with everything else. And we're going to set a box to 5 millimeters in height. And we're going to make it really small and narrow. That should be good. And I'm going to make a few copies of them. Now I have 3 copies of this, and I'm going to place them in the object here. Oops, I gotta zoom in a little close. So you might want to change your snap grid on the bottom, either off or set it to the lowest setting. So I'm going to turn it off, and this will give me just a lot more control with the mouse, so I can get it exactly where I want to get it. Okay, that looks pretty good. You could make these narrower. I would recommend not making them any narrower than 1 millimeter, just because when we go to 3D print, the 3D printer only has so much detail. So if it's too thin, it might be very brittle. So now that we have all of our bridges in place, I'm going to group everything. And there we go. Now it's all one solid object. It's all one pin. So all we have left to do now is make that little loop that we made before, which we can do again with the tube. Rotate it, make it smaller. Now it's going to be a little trickier with this design because we don't want to cover up any of the artwork. It was easy with the clover because it was all just one big flat object. But because we have all these holes here, we don't want to cover those up. So we're going to have to make almost a little rainbow design that connects from one piece to another. So let's first figure out how we want the pin to be oriented. I think this is how I would want it printed. So I'm going to start there. Now we're going to rotate the loop so it's perpendicular with that design, the way we want it oriented. Okay. Now we need to have it connect from this gray bar up here down to this area here. So we're going to do that. Oops. Select this. I'll raise it up a little bit. And it's okay if it doesn't look perfect. We're going to fix it in a second. But basically, we want to make that. So that creates a little loop there. It's not covering up any of our artwork. It is a little bit, so let me just adjust that a little bit. There we go. It's not covering up our artwork. It has a little loop there. Now we just need to trim the bottom, and we should be good to go. So again, I'm going to grab a box. And again, I know the box is 20 millimeters high, so I'm going to move it down to minus 20 millimeters so it's flush with the bottom. I can always enter it manually there. Okay, so now it's flush with the bottom. I'm going to put it underneath my design. I'm going to select everything, group it, and there we go. There is our pin. So once you have your design, I chose the triangle just because it's the quickest for this tutorial, but if you wanted to make any kind of design at all, you would just need to make sure you spend more time to connect all these bridges, if you even have any. But once you have your pin all finished, you're going to select it and get it ready to be printed. So once you have it selected, you're going to click Export in the top right, and you're going to make sure that it says, when you under Include, say just the selected shape, not everything in the design. And you're going to save it as either an OBJ or an STL file. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to click STL, and then you can see at the bottom here, I downloaded our file. So once you have this STL file, you can go to the Sable Library website, sablelibrary.org. And under Library Services, you're going to go to 3D Printing. And just fill out this quick form here. Upload your file. Enter your name, phone number, and email address. Hit submit. And then your file will get sent right to me, and I'll get it going in the 3D printer for you. All right. So that is all for today. I hope you learned a lot. And start modeling, and I will print your pins in time for St. Patrick's Day. Thanks for watching.